Hello, may I introduce myself? My name's Alan Rolfe. I'm a senior tax advisor for Hopper Williams and Bell, and also responsible for our Academy VAT website, which provides advice and guidance for academies. What I'd like to do in this presentation is share a few possible problem areas that we've encountered for academies when dealing with the VAT world. So the first part that is important for any academy is to understand that VAT is only applicable to business transactions. So the first step when looking at the VAT position is always to apportion expenditure in particular between those business and non-business activities. So as I've listed here, the first step is to think first about the non-business activities. These are the core school educational activities, and VAT on these can always be fully reclaimed. The remaining VAT relates to business activities carried out by the school academy trust, and the VAT rules will apply to these in the usual way. So let's have a look at some of the issues that arise in first trying to apportion VAT between business and non-business activities. To be able to make this distinction, we need to understand what a business activity actually is. This is quite widely drawn and can include things that perhaps don't immediately seem like business operations. Clearly something that's designed to raise funds for the Academy Trust in a commercial manner will be caught as a business activity, but it is quite wide and includes a supply made simply for the purpose of making an income, and includes the supply of goods or services. Examples that are commonly found within Academy trusts are lettings, that's usually one of the biggest ones, but some incidental supplies that appear to be closely related to education are still treated as business activities. This might include things like uniform sales, sales from a school shop, and paid nursery provision. The non-business activities are all those grant-funded school educational operations. They also include a select group of supplies that have been defined as being closely related to education. I've listed them here. It's things such as school meals, school trips, school transport, and a few other incidentals such as instrument sales and boarding accommodation related to the education. So how do we apportion this? We have to look at a measurable method between those activities that are business and those that are non-business. There are a number of ways this could be done, using perhaps income, splitting it between business and non-business. It could be time, it could be the area within the school that's devoted to different activities, staff numbers, funding, or a mix of all of these. The important thing to note is that the revenue do not have a prescribed method that must be used. Because we're just simply apportioning between business and non-business activities, we just need to find an easy to use but measurable method for doing this. So let's have a look at a quick example. We might have, say, a school hall that's used partly for school activities and partly for lettings. So one method for apportioning it would be to look at the total available time and then see how much of that time is allocated to the lettings. I've got an example here looking at a typical availability for a school building. If we say it's available for perhaps 12 hours a day every day, and then let for a few hours during the week and a few at the weekend, we can work out the percentage that relates to the business lettings and the part that is the school use being the bulk of the activities carried on there. The school doesn't have to actively be using the building for all of those hours. It's just a case of calculating the maximum available time and then apportioning out that time where it's blocked from school use because it's being let out for other purposes. Now, this isn't the only method, but it's one easily measurable way of calculating it, particularly for something such as a letting of a school hall or a sports field, something like that. In the example, we've worked out perhaps that the non-business element would be 76% of the total available time, and that proportion of the VAT can be recovered. So that's quite an important basis to bear in mind, but there are other ways of getting to this point. And this is always the first step before we worry about the VAT treatment of the business income. The first step is to make sure we claim all of our non-business VAT and have a method for working that out. So one further area that is important to look at is the lettings themselves. These can be a problem, and the VAT definition of sports lettings is important because it's a business activity. So we've got a specific definition in the VAT legislation, in the part of the rules that exempt certain supplies, and in particular we're looking at a supply by an eligible body, so that's a non-profitable body such as an academy trust, and it's of supplies closely linked with and essential to sport or physical education in which the individual is taking part. So what that means is if we let out the school field and it's to a sports club of members, so not a commercial organisation, but perhaps the local hockey club, the local rugby club, that would be a supply of sports lettings. We don't need to consider the rules that local authorities need to worry about, which is the rules about a series of 10 lettings or where the letting extends over a continuous period of 24 hours. Those are not relevant to academy trusts. All we're worried about is, does it qualify as a sports letting under that definition? The exceptions you're likely to find would be where it's let to a commercial organisation, perhaps for a summer camp or something like that. Then that situation is more likely to be the letting of land and buildings, which again is an exempt supply. So this makes it a lot easier for academies because essentially most lettings, almost all lettings of buildings and sports facilities are going to be VAT exempt. However, there is a consequence here. Because it's a business supply, we can't automatically recover VAT on it, and we're not able to recover VAT directly related to the costs of making an exempt supply. So sports lettings will result in some irrecoverable VAT. We can think of a range of things that might be incurred in delivering sports lettings. It would typically cover costs such as cleaning halls, some heating and utility charges, that sort of thing. So what's not covered by the sports letting exemption? Well, equipment hire that is not part of a combined single supply of sports letting, where perhaps you optionally offer for hire some equipment that might or might not be taken with the actual sports facility itself, then that will be a VATable supply, a business supply, but is likely to be subject to VAT at the standard rate. Other items that are perhaps closely related to sports lettings but are not covered by the exemption would be perhaps a social membership of a club, admission charges, and things like sponsorship and advertising around a sports location. The sports lettings are listed in the VAT notice 701/45, and there's a limited list of sports covered. However, In fact, you'll probably find it's unlikely you'll come across a sport that's not covered by the letting exemption. If there was one, perhaps some form of specialist sport that isn't listed in that notice, then there could be a VAT charge. The further area that I'd like to look at today on problem areas that we come across relates to construction. So construction obviously is an expensive activity where you're building a new building, and VAT can present a big issue here. Because of the numbers involved. We could be talking about many hundreds of thousands or millions of pounds to construct a new significant building, and it's really important to get the VAT treatment right. Firstly, we need to understand what the new construction is of. There is an exemption from VAT, a zero rating applicable to a brand new freestanding building or a separately contained annex to an existing building. So this is quite important. Other works, such as repairing a roof or doing a small extension that doesn't create a new building, are treated differently. We also have problems relating to the actual rate of VAT charged by the builders, and that's important to understand what VAT rate we're expecting. Lettings use can also change this because the zero rating of a new building is only possible where the majority of the use is going to be for non-business school use. We're only allowed a very limited percentage, 5%, to be for business use, i.e. lettings. There's a capital goods scheme that applies to buildings where their use might change over a 10-year period. If the cost of constructing the building was more than £250,000, then we have to worry about making a 10-year assessment of the building. Each year we look at what use it's been put to. Obviously, if it's always school use, there's no problem, there's no adjustments. But again, this could be something that needs looking at on a regular annual basis. Another issue that has caused problems is temporary classrooms. Again, this is an area that can sometimes lead to some dispute between the supplier and the school. The question there is whether they're supplying a new building or whether actually it's a temporary building that would be VATable as a removable structure rather than a permanent building. So when we come on to a major project, one issue that arises is it's necessary to issue the main contractor with a certificate saying that we want the buildings work to be zero rated, because that's something that the builder will require if they're going to not charge you VAT. So there are important risks to consider here. It's possible that penalties or interest could be charged if the VAT has been incorrectly avoided through issuing the certificate recklessly. We have to be careful about this, and was demonstrated in the temporary classroom case involving a hire company, Sibcas, where the school believed that the supply would be a zero rated supply of a new building because the temporary classrooms were permanently bolted to the ground in a way that made it very difficult to remove them. However, the case itself found that that's not always the case, and you have to be very careful as to whether the construction is actually of a new building or whether actually it's only the hire of a temporary classroom that can be easily removed, and in which case issuing a certificate for zero rating won't be the right action to take. A further point to make on construction projects, is that the construction industry scheme, which is used by main contractors when engaging subcontractors to do work and requires a tax deduction to be made from the payments, that doesn't apply to academy trusts. There's a specific exemption from that, and therefore the VAT domestic reverse charge for construction industry supplies cannot apply either. So I think the point there is you don't really need to worry about those two things. Just be aware that they're not relevant to construction projects. Importantly, though, getting the VAT right is important because obviously the revenue will only repay VAT that's been correctly charged by a builder. And obviously, any buildings constructed for school use that are perhaps an extension or a major renovation, that can be a significant amount of VAT, and you need to make sure the builder charges correctly, but then it can be fully recovered. We have to be watchful, though, to make sure that there aren't supplies within that building that mean it's not wholly used for the non-business school use, and therefore that might have a restriction on the VAT that could be reclaimed. So I've quickly whistled through a few of the issues that might crop up. I didn't want to scare you too much with lots of other minor things. These are a couple of the big areas, and we're happy to advise further on these, but you may also find that our Academy VAT website is helpful for this. It is a subscription service, but I think it provides quite a valuable resource because it breaks down between what are business activities and what are non-business activities for the Academy Trust, and also provides some further guidance and support for that. So I hope you found this useful, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to pass them on my way. My email's on the slide there. Many thanks. Goodbye.